August the 10th, 1988, I received a letter from the Tanana Valley State Fair Association telling me that I just won an award for submitting a story to the Fairbanks Daily News Miner in the category of adult. Um, and Here's the story. We walked through the fairgrounds, Melody strapped into a jerry pack on my back, and 3-year-old Chris holding my hand. Nothing has ever made me as happy as these two people. They were a half dozen rides just for little kids at the Fairbanks Tanana Valley Fair that year. When adults were allowed, we rode the rides together. I thoroughly enjoyed riding with them around and around in those silly little power boats on the miniature carousel. We pitched gently up and down as if crossing the ocean, with annoying little buzzers squawking while all the time going in a small circle. We visited farm animals in the petting zoo. Child's eyes always seemed to be unusually large to begin with, but as we enjoyed the fair, their eyes seemed to grow even bigger in step with their excitement. Being with them allowed me to enjoy the wonderment of a small child once again. Gina, their mother, and I were moving close to divorce, although I don't think either one of us necessarily knew it at the time. Anger and criticism were becoming more and more frequent. She had been becoming involved in the Democratic Party over the last couple of years and was now running for the state Senate against her former University of Alaska classmate. Republican Terry Miller was a successful and popular incumbent. Gina wasn't known outside of the Democratic Party, but she knew she stood little chance of winning. But he'd been running unopposed, so she figured she had a little to use and something to gain. She was a loving mother to Chris and Mel. Was a candidate, she spent her time at the fair campaigning and wanted them with her only for photo sessions or other political media events. That Wednesday afternoon, she asked me to bring Chris and Melody by the Democratic booth so she could spend a little time wandering the fair with them. We agreed to meet again in an hour so I would take them back and she could get back to her campaigning. There were some home building projects I wanted to investigate, so this arrangement worked about as it had previous days. While I was wandering, I suddenly heard my voice over the public address system. I felt my heart race because these calls were usually announcements of lost children. I hurried to the information booth near the main entrance to the fair. There stood Gina in tears with Melody and the pack sack on her back. Chris had disappeared. In the midst of walking through the main exhibit hall and talking with vendors, she suddenly realized he wasn't there. We described the clothes he was wearing to several people who had been gathered to help us. We all spread out to search the grounds, and a general call went out asking everyone at the fair to help us find our little boy. I retraced the steps Chris, Mel, and I had taken earlier and tried to remember which things he liked best. He was not at the petting zoo. Not he was not to be found in the places I thought he'd be. As the minutes raced by, I felt myself becoming alternatively a bit frantic and then at the same time surprisingly calm, steady, and being really thorough, making sure I wasn't missing him. Could I have looked right at him and missed him? Anyway, I heard across the. Finally, I said I couldn't find him in the fairgrounds itself. I went across the parking towards the parking lot towards our car, jumping over knee-high pipe barriers and dodging through 3 long lines of cars moving in and out of the fairgrounds that were churning up a lot of dust. The dust was almost as high as my head. I dreaded the thought he might try to get back to our car amidst all that dust and traffic. There he was, asleep in his car seat. I opened the rear car door and closed it quietly behind me and sat down beside him. He was fast asleep, worn out from his busy adventures at the fair. After a few moments allowing myself to unwind, I knew that he was safe. I lifted him from his perch and carried him back to the information booth. Gina hugged him as I held him. The announcement went out that he was found. We thanked everyone for their help. We were so thankful to have him back.